The mistake we make is life will be great. I will have arrived if I only have this one thing. And then we get that and we realize, oh, things really haven't changed.
You don't really want the thing. You just want the experience that you think it's going to give you.
The greatest fulfillment in achieving a goal is we're serving a purpose for someone else.
True abundance and prosperity is being able to experience it already right now with God.
Nestled in the heart of the Ozark Mountains, Shepherd of the Ozarks is a 435-acre retreat where faith, adventure, and renewal come together. Today we're sitting down with Johnny Snyder, the owner who took over this incredible camp just 2 years ago in a miraculous way. As a first-time business owner, he's been amazed at the blessings God has given him to shepherd this place. We'll talk about his journey, the miracles he's witnessed, and dive into a powerful conversation on abundance, wealth, and prosperity from a Christian perspective. Get ready for an inspiring episode.
The coming about of SOTO, which oftentimes people wonder, what's that? Some people think, is that a Japanese place? But it's an acronym, stands for Shepherd of the Ozarks. We're actually just about 2 hours south of Branson, 2 hours north of Little Rock. And Shepherd of the Ozarks, I had not even known of its existence until I was moved to look for places to host the Feast of Tabernacles.
And just to say to our viewers that don't know what the Feast of Tabernacles is, basically it's like a week-long party for God where you're just there for him. And it's like a conference slash party. And it's in the Bible because I think about half of our viewers so far may not know about it.
The first time I hosted was in 2019 in North Texas, and we had 250 people there. We had 250 the next feast. And then I started getting a little bit strong reservation about whether or not it needs to be me, because I was very sensitive about it, the focus being me, because I feel like it can be anybody. But at the same time, when it comes to who am I would say I'm a child of God, and he places within us the responsibility to disciple others, plain and simple. And I would say one of my mantras is lay my life down, just as our Savior laid his life down for us. So that's how I've lived my life, continue to live my life. But it was back in 2015, before we hosted in 19, that I inquired of the camp in Arkansas. And when I first saw it, I thought, well, this is just way too remote. I'm not going to get anybody out here. But then I did go out in 2021 and was just amazed at the atmosphere, the beauty, and the natural scenery there. I thought this is the place to host the Feast of Tabernacles. So I went there, and lo and behold, the fellow, a good friend of mine who helps me with hosting the feast on the music side and some administrative details, he said, I have no problem with this being a feast, but my family wants to go somewhere else this year. And we ended up going. So, but I said, definitely this next year we're going. And after that, we went to another conference, and somebody I just met, they said, you guys are always hosting these feasts. Why don't you go and buy a place? And I said, yeah, right. With what? And I said, usually my experience, as soon as somebody buys something, a church buys a building, then there's a split or there's a schism or there's something. And so I thought it wasn't on the radar, but I did find out that Shepherd of the Ozarks, we'll call it SOTO for short, and they work for sale, of all things. And I thought, well, that's still not for me. So I knew of another church organization that was looking for camps, and they declined, and it was an extremely good price. And I said, really? How are you going to pass on this? So, but they did. The owner kept persuading me. He said, well, maybe you could acquire it yourself the same way I acquired it. And I said, me own a camp? That wasn't even on the horizon, wasn't even a thought. And here's the kicker is I grew up in the woods. I grew up around camp life. I grew up with a matchstick in my hand and starting a campfire everywhere I could go, um, throwing hatchets at targets and uh, all of that stuff out woods. I would come in from East Texas playing, and my ankles would be stained red from the red clay. And I was just that outdoors kid. And I
Yeah.
grew up on a dairy and then a farm, milking goats and feeding chickens and protecting our livestock from the animals that would come in. And all of a sudden it hit me that, wait a minute, I'm nearing retirement and I'm thinking, what are my plans for retirement? Because I'm not of the opinion that you just retire to nothing, to a comfortable life. And that's the mistake. Is like, well, we build up so much in order to live our last few years comfortably. And I said, is that what I was thinking I was doing? And the most amazing thing came to my realization was that God knew better than I how I could live out my years still serving him. And anyway, I still was skeptical as I thought, this place is pretty pricey. It's nothing cheap. But another miracle was that the owner felt compelled. I feel like he was actually selling under duress for whatever reason, but he felt compelled to sell it to me for less than half the appraised value.
Wow. Wow.
And some business people don't like to share those kinds of things. I'm still not a business person. My life is, I mean, I owe my life to God. We all owe our lives to him. I try to be transparent, and sometimes I probably overshare. I believe we're about just under 450 acres in the heart of Ozarks. And in fact, we're right next door to the Ozark National Park, and it's beautiful. Caverns, springs, mountains, not too many lakes that I understand, bears. And in fact, we get them roaming our property from time to time. But just under 450 acres with 10 commercial log cabin lodges that we rent out or lease out to our guests. And we entertain churches that come up. We entertain colleges, men's and women's retreats. But we can house, if it's kids, we can house up to 400. I think we have a little over 400 beds.
Wow.
And we can feed a little over 400 people in our conference center.
Yeah,
So
your dining hall conference center is amazing. I remember when we showed up there for the small discipleship program, you had a big like women's retreat going on. There must have been hundreds and hundreds of people there. I didn't count.
yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing.
and the groups keep coming back year after year. It's tradition. Now, occasionally a big group. We had one of our big groups. Just they had two things going on. They decided to combine it in one other place and just give it another try. But far and away, I go to these camp conferences, and far and away, we are described as a step above, largely due to the uniqueness of our lodges, the log cabins, and also the quality of our food. I mean, everybody's probably experienced camp food.
Yeah.
We're a little bit a step above. It's still comfort food. I would say I wouldn't want to eat it day after day after day after day for months. But when you're talking about a week, it's a delight.
Oh man, with the first night we showed up there, I thought I was literally at like a 5-star restaurant because it was like this beautiful piece of chicken with like a drizzled like balsamic or something, and then this beautiful salad. I was like, honey, if we light some candles, we could pretend we're on a date with like 500 other people.
After 15 hours on the road to get there, to show up and to find a meal plated and presented to us like we were the VIPs.
We've got an amazing staff. And all I had to say was, hey, we've still got another family coming in. And I said, can we hold the food out? And they did one step better. They plated it and put it away in the warmers for you. So
did they? Oh,
that was pretty cool.
I was like actually touched that first night. I really I felt like I walked in and I was like, it was like this big warm hug. I think it's just the whole atmosphere of the place. God's spirit is it's palpable there.
Yeah. The camp itself, we believe it or not, I've owned it for about 2.5 years. And last year we were in its 30th year as a running business.
Yeah.
And I will just say who obtains or acquires a property, much less a business, in its 30th year, making money. And let me just tell you, no money down, no liens against my own property. God just handed it to me.
Wow.
And that's where it sat. It's like it took a year-long process to go through. And during that time, I was probably about midway through that year that I was telling my family, I said, this might happen. And they're saying, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the place in Arkansas. They said, really? Are you crazy? And so all things changed when we took them up there and showed them the place. And my son jumps out. He comes out on the porch on one of the lodges. He said, when do we get this place again? I said, hold on. We don't know if it's going to be. And I said, besides, a huge realization, because you can't help but think that when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar place, and you think, wow, and you start spinning wheels like, what's this going to do for my family? My kids will have an inheritance. And then I was on a hike explaining this to a group of friends. And then I stopped and I turned around. I said, I just realized this will never be my camp. And I better change my perspective because and it hit me. It's like, this is being handed over to me to be a steward of, but I cannot, nor do I want to look at it as a possession for myself. And then I felt like that if I do that, then it's going to defeat the whole purpose of why he's provided it. So I'm just thrilled that he has provided it, and we're looking for ways to continue making it of service. Now, one thing that's different is it's always really served as a non-programmed camp, which means groups come in and they run their own programs.
It's just a venue, right?
Correct. Yeah. There's one exception that we host and that we've always hosted is family camp over July 4th. And we do commercial grade fireworks and a steak dinner. And so we host that. But we still run the activities. So high ropes, paintball. I think we have 6 amazing trails, and then a cliffhanger, which is a big swing. There's low ropes. There's a challenge course. It's really great for corporate outings and such. But one thing, and this was where you guys came in, is we really felt led, and we still feel largely that the Great Commission, Matthew 28, to go and make disciples, that's the one job God gives us, other than loving each other. And hopefully the love comes with that.
Right.
Hand in hand, yeah.
That should precede it, actually. But we were just led that we need to, I felt like literally God gave me a city, the same as the parable. And I'm thinking, I need to double this city.
Wow.
And so, but I don't want to do it of my own doing. I really want him to lead me. And that's where one of the questions you asked me was SOTO a lifelong aspiration or out of the blue opportunity? I'd say certainly, as you can tell, it was an out of blue.
Right.
And God knew better than I that I could live out my years serving in that way. And there goes my dog up the stairs. Anyway, where it led was we wanted to do more intentional outreaches. One of the first things we realized is we need to serve the local community because there's a lot of issues like drug addiction and such in the local area. And we're actually working on that right now. But the other thing that we felt like was really tangible was we hired some fellow classmates of mine from that attended Ambassador University, and they're professors up or were professors up at Emporia State, Dusty and Deanne Howell. And I asked him if he would be our on-site ministry. So that was huge. And together we put together a curriculum and a plan to do a 3-week pilot discipleship program. And our goal was to get 12 students, and we got 12. We started with 12 and we ended with 12. Now, one dropped off, but we gained another.
Oh, amazingly symbolic. I did not even know that whole. That's really interesting.
If you stop to think, that sounds like a familiar exchange, but in slightly less epic circumstances with the disciples starting.
Isn't that something?
That is so cool.
I didn't even think about that.
As you're describing it, it clicked, and I thought, wow, that's uncanny.
It's 12 disciples, which I thought you did. I thought you did that intentionally, but then one left and it got replaced. It's the Judas and then Paul.
Not to ascribe any deeper meaning to any of the individuals who are in the program.
Let me say, we're not ascribing the one that dropped off as Judas.
We are not. We are allowing God to express something symbolic without assigning any more than that.
A calling. We'll just call it that.
That's really cool.
Oh my! I had never seen that association.
So you didn't choose the number of 12 even?
Well, yes.
You did that on purpose.
Well, I just felt like that's the number that seemed reasonable.
But not because it was 12 disciples?
No.
What? That's so cool.
That was the number that just came to my head.
I think that God has been working on you in ways that you don't even realize until way later. And I think that's how it happens to everybody. At some point, you're like, wait a minute.
In hindsight, you go, wow, I didn't realize how significant that was in the moment.
I think this answers your question for me about what's the one big thing that helped me achieve my goals. First of all, I'll say that it is important to have goals, but I think we need to recognize our goals if they are for building ourselves up or building everyone, helping us build others up. If we're searching out and holding on to a goal that is purely building self up, it doesn't mean that those goals aren't achieved, but I think when we do get those goals, there's still so much lack of fulfillment in them. The greatest fulfillment in achieving a goal, if it's the right goal, is that we're serving a purpose for someone else.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where SOTO comes in again. It's like, this is not just to build me up. This is to bring people in and them to enjoy the atmosphere there. And that's why we've been asked, do you want to start a church out there? And I'm thinking, well, a church how? I mean, a body of people is a church.
Right.
A group of people, a couple in a house is part of the church. So I really don't want to keep going down that road of building a church. Mm-hmm. The church is built.
Meaning, and people ask that meaning.
And Jesus Christ is at the cornerstone of it.
Yeah. So people ask, are you starting a church? And they think, are you going to have a building and seats and a budget and a set time every week for services and people that come? And it's a very prescriptive way of looking at something that's talking really about the spiritual body.
I mean, when you look at the first church that was really started by Jesus, I mean, it was a bunch of guys hanging out in the wilderness, kind of like the Ozarks. So, I mean, if we're going by that criteria, maybe it already is a church.
Yeah, I discount them because they didn't have a lectern with the
right. Yeah, forget that.
So I think those guys are, I don't know.
No ties. They're off the list.
Aaron finally stopped wearing ties when he gives messages at church. It's been a big change.
It's a running joke in our congregation that every time I speak a message, I'm less well dressed than the time before.
Gonna be in jeans soon.
That is interesting. I again, like the goals and the decisions that I made, like the 12 didn't even occur to me, but it just popped in my head. I really find that we have the greatest fulfillment, the greatest value added to our lives when we ask God the question. Where would you go? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say? Even before this meeting, it's important to me. I don't want it to be my words. I want it to be words that you speak through me, and they're edifying and they build up, because I know I can make a mess of it myself. And if it's just me, then it's somehow, some way, it's the realization, if it's just me, um, it's not fulfilling a good purpose.
There's a huge difference between picking a goal that could be good and outward focused, and there's nothing wrong with it, and praying, God, please bless this and make it happen, as compared to reaching a point. And I sounds like you've reached that point. I've reached that point. I know many people will be able to relate to that, where you say, I'm done trying to pick. Just show me what you want me to do,
Yeah.
and I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's the whatever moment, whatever you want, that
Right.
is magical, really.
Well, I think within that framework, I think what we continue to do, it seems like in churches in the world, is balance evades us. Either we're going off in one ditch or the other. And I think it's good to have goals. I mean, I remember being young and I thought, I want to be married. I want to be married before Jesus Christ returns.
Yeah.
And, looking back on that, I think, well, that's pretty naive view, but yet God made us in such a way to want that.
He put that in our hearts.
Exactly. Now, if it came down to it, would we want that over Jesus Christ returning? Well, I mean, an immature kid is probably going to say, no, I want to wait. I want to fulfill. I want to have kids. I want to build my own house. I want to do these
Live a
things.
life.
And then that can come. It's like, well, as we mature, we realize how immature that is, and that please bring his coming as soon as
Right. Well, the
possible.
more we experience, the fruit of good
This
and
life.
evil, like, good, there's all that stuff you want. And then there's all this evil that, the longer you live, and we haven't lived that long yet. I guess we're at midlife crisis mode right now. But but you start seeing just so much where you're like, oh man, like it's only been in the last few years, even for me, where I felt like, man, God, like I'm here for a reason, but I actually long for it. And I think everybody gets to that stage at some point, sooner or later. But yeah.
Yeah. I think well, for myself, I have to constantly resolve in my mind what creature comforts am I trying to find comfort or safety in, even if it's a cup of coffee. It's like, what's wrong with a cup of coffee? Well, I mean, like anything else, if it just dements our thinking, that's where our dependency is
Right.
on.
We can want things that are in line with his will. There's nothing wrong with wanting it, but when you start needing it, even if
Yeah.
it's as simple as I need that cup of coffee,
Yeah.
that's when it shifts into this self-centered, like it's all about me mode.
Where it starts taking away from whatever God is calling you
Yeah.
to or leading to,
It's
instead of adding a richness to it, where that is still the top of the heap in terms of priorities.
detaching your need from that, because anything that you're not really detached from the outcome, it's almost like you make it an idol of some sort.
I absolutely believe, and I know you guys do too, that God really wants to bless us. And but logically, I think we can realize that he doesn't want to give us something that's going to destroy us
Yes.
spiritually.
It's about how much can you handle? Like, because we always ask that question, like, can I really handle this? Right? Like, can you handle a relationship? Can you handle the truth? But it's really like that container of how much can you actually hold without getting freaked out and burying it in the ground or running away, right?
Right.
It
Right.
reminds me of the ancient Israelites, where I know, or I believe that God was using this as a teaching tool for all time and for us, where he blessed the ancient Israelites with the plunder of Egypt. And what did they do? They literally turned it into an idol. They took all of
And
those
then it
blessings
had
and
to be
turned
destroyed.
exactly. So they literally turned it into something to worship, and God had to destroy it and remove it from them. And so what things does God let happen like that in our lives, and what things does He keep us from that would turn into an idol, that would, cause us that much harm?
This is getting into an interesting angle because I'm actually interested in your take on the whole prosperity gospel. I saw a comment you made on Facebook about that, and I thought I was like, oh, he's got an interesting, more balanced take on this maybe than some people.
God does want to bless us.
I think a lot of people that watch this podcast and I think the audience we're aiming for, they want the prosperity, but at the same time, they know that it's not just as simple as name it
It's
and
not,
claim it. There's no like law of
it's not
attraction thing going
transactional.
on, all the manifestation stuff, but they do know that there's something there because God does say He wants to bless us.
Right. You've heard your whole life that some the impoverished cultures in the world can be sometimes the closest to God because of not having the material things. And then there's the example of the rich man, not being able to enter the kingdom, that it'd be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And of course, that's just that's not to take literal. I think it's just a depiction. But I think certainly, as far as prosperity, I would say here's an example that He has allowed us to acquire this property, multi-million dollar property. And I would say, knowing that our intent, our hope, our dream, our wish, our will is not to flaunt it, to make it, to live in a way other than how He would want us to live. It's funny because, Solomon was the wealthiest man in the world and probably will not be any wealthier than him. And of course, he at the end, I thought the wisdom he had was that it was all vanity.
Mm.
And I would use that depiction as like, well, if we're seeking wealth, because I've been asked this before, if we're seeking wealth, am I seeking the wrong thing?
Mm.
I said, there's nothing wrong with wanting to provide and live well, as long as living well doesn't become your God.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I've got a car in the garage that I'm a little bit embarrassed about because it's a little sports car, and I think I don't need that, nor am I babying it in such a way that it is a God to me. But I'm sitting here thinking, Johnny, who you fooling? You still got the car. You wanted it, you have it. And I think there is that fine line that we have to determine for ourselves what is important to us. In the end, are you ready to give it all up?
Mm-hmm.
Walk away from it, no issues.
Because, like it or not, at one point you will.
At some
Yeah,
point.
we're not taking any of this with us.
Yeah.
And I've had people come to our camp even. I've experienced families that they've done that challenge. Go and sell it, what you have, give to the poor, and follow me. And I'm not saying it's a wrong heart, it's a good heart, but that's what they're hoping to do. They're just laying it down. We've got to be very calculated too, and I'm not saying they weren't, but we've got to be very careful that we're not fooling ourselves in those attempts, that we need a relationship with God. We need His direction.
Yeah.
Does He need to see us sell everything in order to prove our love for Him? He knows. He knows. He doesn't need to see us do something tangible.
He knows what the test is for each person, and
it's
that's
not the
very
same.
individual, specific, because one person might need to sacrifice a relationship, and that's their biggest thing, right? Because they put more value in that than God. I feel like it's specific.
Someone else might need to sacrifice the little sports car in order
That's
to
right.
move past that. And the rest of us, I can relate. Last year, I got myself a little red convertible. I always wanted a
It's been his
fun car.
dream for like their whole
Last
marriage.
20 years. And it was fascinating how I had a lot of the same thoughts as you. I look out and I see it sitting in the driveway, and it's a 19-year-old car. It is not a sign of overwhelming wealth, but it's a little red sports car. And I would look out and feel just excited and happy, but at the same time think, who do I think I am? Do I deserve
Imposter.
this? What are other people going to think? All of these negative judgment thoughts. But then coming back to, I'm willing to walk away from it in a moment. And it's a blessing that God opened
And
up for me a little desire
it's
of my
also
heart.
it's also cheaper than our van. So
Yeah, that's true. The minivan costs more than the sports car. So
but
all
that's
things in
but that's a
perspective.
really interesting heart change for him too, though. Like he always had, a dream of like something like an Aston Martin or something like, really glamorous or sportsy and expensive. But, at some point he kind of realized he's like, you know what? I'm gonna get the same feeling if I can just drive faster around the roads in like a little like $3,000
Yep,
like red
just
convertible. I
a
don't care.
little fun 20-year-old lightning bolt
Yeah.
is just as much fun as something with six zeros behind it.
I think that's a key too. It's like you don't really want the thing. You just want the experience that you think it's going to give you. And I think that true abundance and prosperity is being able to experience that thing that you think you want through an object, experience it already right now with God.
That's
Then
right.
maybe he would give you the thing in the physical world. But I think that we need to be able to just we need to, I mean, that's what it means to seek first the kingdom, right? And then he'll add the stuff. If you try to
Right.
seek first the stuff, then you might get it, but you might feel really unfulfilled and something else in your life might blow up. Or I don't know,
Or
it's
just
interesting.
realize if you get everything you've ever dreamed of, and at the end you realize just how empty everything you've dreamed of actually is. Well, that's Ecclesiastes. You mentioned
Yeah.
Solomon. He got to the point where, okay, he had the apex of human existence, and he realized, what's it all for if that's
Right.
all there is?
I think I would describe it if we think I can remember this thought as I was a kid. I was pretty content with what toys I had, but there was no doubt about it that I saw other kids that had much more. Was I envious? Well, probably. I mean, I'm not going to fool you. It's like, yeah, I'd like to have those things, but I was also content with what I had. Would it have been better? Oh, yeah, definitely. But the mistake we make is life will be great. I will have arrived if I only have this one thing.
If, when.
If and when, and then we get that and we realize, oh, things really haven't changed. In fact, I enjoyed it for a bit, but I'm a little bit more depressed because it didn't do what I thought it was going to do.
Hmm.
And a good friend of mine gave a message recently, a few months ago, about having he was illustrating standing on a couple of one thing that was stable, one thing that was a little bit rocky, and he was describing about having one foot in the world and one foot firmly established on Jesus Christ. And he says, "Look, I'm illustrating it for you. This is the reality. This is how we live our life. We need to be all in with Him. It doesn't mean." That he himself, he says, I pray not to take you out of the world, but just keep you from evil. He doesn't want to deprive us, but he also wants us to know that he is first. And when we are sincere about wanting to live life according to his will and the way he made us, we are absolutely blessed and filled with joy and fulfillment. And there is no empty chasm whatsoever as long as we're on that road. But as long as if we're still sustaining a path that, oh, if I had this thing, then now I can die. Really? I'll tell you something interesting. There's two things going on right now that are kind of interesting that I feel like I don't know if it's necessarily God testing me. I have always dreamed of living on a lake, and I was a water skier, but I never knew if it would ever happen. But I'd always kept with the real estate in mind. I've always kept my eyes open, and lo and behold, we're building a house on a lake in East Texas. And I'm thinking, what am I doing? It's like, what is this going to demonstrate? I'm trying to portray to people that, possessions and all is not where it's at, but that's where the prosperity thing comes in. It's like, well, I'm not putting all of my hope in this either. And
Mm.
I'm thinking, if I move into this lake house, I'm not feeling like this is all of a sudden I've arrived and I've reached the pinnacle of success. And I'm just going to say, look, if he lets me live in this house and as an air, or it's going to be an Airbnb, then I'll enjoy it. Uh, the other story is, and I think you guys knew, we were just recently down in Belize. We took the staff down there, and lo and behold, we took a tour of a spice farm and botanical gardens. And at the end of the tour, one of the guides says, "Oh, by the way, we're for sale." Well, I didn't think anything. I was like, "Okay, interesting," and I'm not thinking anything of it. My staff are going, "Johnny, what do you think?" What do you mean? What do I think? Why would I? What would I have with a spice farm? So all of a sudden, wheels are turning. It's like, is this a door?
What
Is
could we do
is
with
this
a
another?
spice farm?
Is this where you're steering me? And again, we're kind of in a similar scenario as SOTO. The property is being offered to us well under appraised value.
Hmm.
And of course, I already passed one financial source and they said, "Oh, we need 20% down, $800,000." And I thought, I don't have that. And if this is really meant to be, then with God, I think lightning can strike in the same place twice.
Yeah, right. He can make a way. He can part the Red Sea for you if it's the right
And
thing.
so one is out of the way, and tomorrow I'm talking to another bank and I'm thinking,
Wow.
it's in your hands. What would I have to do with a spice farm in Belize? And I'm thinking, well, it's a food source. It's out of the United States. What do you have planned? I mean, they're not our thoughts. So it's just interesting. I'm describing this to some friends, and they're saying, "Johnny, you have entertained some interesting experiences." And I'm thinking, yeah, and I do not deserve it. I'm just amazed at the opportunities. And I
Well,
said, if all of this just fell flat on its face, I would be fulfilled.
uh, and I think that's why those opportunities are being presented to you. Because what I hear from you is complete like
Surrender.
surrender, putting things into God's hands and shepherding what He has given you. When you have the heart of service, when you have the heart of shepherding, I mean, it's called Shepherd of the Ozarks. Come on. God does bring blessings and they can be material. They don't always have to be, but I think it's very inspiring because, I don't see anything that you've said as being like, I'm trying to get something from this. It's all about what can I give? To he who has, more will be given.
And he who has one camp, a spice farm will you never know. If
So why
Yeah.
not?
if that's you've proven faithful in one thing, and all right, whatever you want to give me next, okay. And it doesn't need to be this, it doesn't need to be that.
It's kind of like walking
It's
with open hands towards God to be like, hey, like if you want to give me, like whatever you want to give me, I'm fine with.
Mhm.
Or whatever you want to take, it's also fine.
The beauty of the relationship that God offers us is surrender yourself to us, to me. And the other thing is, I will say, I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of friends that have questioned things. One thing I have probably, I would say, a healthy fear of is I've never wanted to be separated from God. And as we know, living life with a desire to be close to Him, and we trip up. He is true. When we sin, we separate ourselves from Him, and I know that I hate that feeling. I hate that feeling of being separated from Him. I actually say this a lot to people who are on the fence about getting baptized. I said, look, you've got to ask yourself, do you see yourself from this point forward ever living your life separate from God? Ever? And they said, well, no. I said, well, you have your answer then. Where else can you go? What else can you do? You say in your heart, you never want to be separated from the Father and to receive his Son. And that's the life we live, is like, well, we do tend to separate ourselves, but only for a moment when we're going through something and we're in our own minds veering off, but then we get realigned with him. And that's why even thoughts in my head, sometimes I get, there's opportunity for depressions, like, oh, where is my mind? And I have to collect myself. I say, this is only for a moment. God, please set me back with you. Give me the hope and restructure, realign my thinking that it is with you. And I would say many friends have seen examples, the same examples I've seen. And I think the mistake has been that we see God through men's eyes and we're disappointed. And that is sadly the picture we have of who God is, but he is far and above more than what we can imagine. And we can't see God through men's eyes because we will always be disappointed.
We'll always end up reducing him to something we can conceive of.
Something
Yeah,
imperfect.
we so much want to make God tangible. And I would say the tangibility that God allows us to see is when there is fruit that he bears through a person that he can use. And we can see that love exude from them. Granted, that same person is going to make a mistake. They're going to, slip up. They're going to gossip. They're going to do whatever it is. But then the beauty of it is we're always brought back to him and realigned. So you asked the question, what do you think most Christians today are missing in their quest for finding their purpose and achieving big things? I would say that we just have to be honest with ourselves. Like, what are we searching for? And it's a lifelong thing to be distracted by the world, to live in a nice house. I mean, who doesn't want to live in a nice house? Who doesn't want to have a nice steak from time to time or drive a nice car? But we also have to come to the maturity and the spiritual soundness of realizing that we don't want that to define us. If we're looking for those things to define us, then we've got an uphill battle, but that's it. Who here doesn't have an uphill battle? Because that's what we're always striving to overcome, is basically ourselves. And one thing that's always a big mantra with me in scripture is the scripture, I'll paraphrase, it says, he who seeks to save himself will lose his life. And I picture that's the individual that's living life for themselves, self-preservation. And it could even be skewed from the standpoint of somebody that wants to be in the kingdom just to save their souls, but is forsaking the very element of the beauty of living our lives like God, like he planned for us, because therein lies true fulfillment. If we are able to truly love even an enemy, imagine the peace that we can have. And I say imagine because it still evades us.
It's interesting where something you said just sparked this thought that whatever we're experiencing in life, we're going to have the three score and 10 of whatever the experiences we live through in life. Those are the experiences that we have. And if we're focusing on, I want to experience this, I want to experience that, I want the steak dinners and the expensive cars and the physical experiences that are fulfilling and that I think will make life better. God's clear on what that once you have those experiences, that's the reward, and then it's over.
It's kind of like, it's that whole like empty cup analogy, like where if you have a cup with a hole in the bottom and you continue to try to fill the hole, it's like each one of those things you were saying, like a steak dinner or other things like that. It's like that's a hit, of like reward and pleasure coming in, but then you can't keep it.
It seems like usually happens at baptism or when we've made a commitment to follow God. Then all of a sudden we enter into some unseemly trials. And we have to know that God chastens those who he loves. And one thing, I don't necessarily welcome trials, but I also try to logically think about, okay, this is happening. I want to make sure I'm learning the lesson that is intended for this trial and see it as a blessing that he is helping me grow in this moment. We have to be tested and we have to overcome our materialism, our thoughts of vanity, and all these things, and we have to weed it out in our own hearts and minds.
It makes sense when you say it like right after baptism, because a baptism is it's kind of like an anointing, in some respect, and you lay hands on somebody and they receive the Spirit. And I've been watching the new show on Prime. It's House of David.
Oh,
It
is
just
that good?
came. It just came out. It's actually pretty good.
We just watched the first episode, and I was really impressed at the production quality.
But the reason I bring it up is because it sparked me thinking about the life of David from the perspective of every trial being the growth opportunity that you need to expand how much you can actually hold, how many talents can God actually like give you to use. Because you got to think like David was anointed. He was going to be king. Like there was already like set out for him.
That was decided.
But then, he had to go through trial after trial after trial. And why did he end up like hiding in a cave, running for his life? All of that was just stuff that needed to get worked out of him and
Right.
before he could actually receive that big blessing. So I try to look at every trial from that perspective of like, okay, this is making me a better Mary.
You've heard that joke about someone praying for humility. I'd be careful about that because that's we may think. I'm not saying it's wrong to, but it's better when we pray just to ask God. Really, it's first of all, it's invaluable to confess, and we know if we're deficient in some areas and to ask for the other. But anyway, be careful of what we ask for. But also recognize that if it comes our way, then there's a purpose, a beautiful purpose for it, and we can flip a trial right on its head and look at it from another perspective because so much is just mental outlook and how we perceive things and how we respond to it. So
100%. I think that's really the only choice we really have in some respect. How are you going to respond to this? And if you respond to it well, God directs your life just a little better than it was before. And each time you do that, it's just a little bit better than it was before. I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. What do you think?
Yeah,
Any
I
last
think
thoughts?
so. We've had you for over an hour now.
I'd like to thank you. I didn't make mention we had you at our discipleship program, but I didn't give the details, and it was
I forgot to put my hat on there.
it was amazing, and we were so thankful you guys accepted our invitation to come and teach for an entire week of the 3 weeks we were there. That was priceless.
It was the best week of my year last year.
That was a wonderful experience. We met so many great people, and just the time there was just it was incredible. And you don't know what a blessing it was to us too.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us, and thank you for coming on our podcast. It was great to hear more of your story and your insights.
Certainly. Thank you very much.
We're not called to be butts in seats. God doesn't call you just to sit there. He calls you to serve.
Everybody has gifts, and they should be free to serve and engage those gifts as the Spirit moves them.